British Prime Minister Boris Johnson can't get rid of the lockdown parties, and his opponents can't get rid of him. It's unlikely that he will resign voluntarily, but next week's elections could change that. The longer it has been since Boris Johnson's party sins, the more investigations are springing up. Last week, the British House of Commons set up a special committee to clarify whether the Prime Minister deliberately duped MPs with his statements on partygate. The police investigation will be completed before its final report, and shortly thereafter the so-called Grey Report, which is based on internal government investigations, will have seen the light of day. Johnson is likely to follow his misconduct during the time of the corona requirements for many months to come. But can it bring him down in the end? With a fine notice that Johnson received at the beginning of April for a birthday reception in the cabinet room, the police now have it on record that he broke the lockdown rules he himself issued at least once in June 2020. But further rulings could follow, as police are investigating a total of 12 questionable gatherings at 10 Downing Street, although Johnson did not attend all of them. Johnson publicly apologized and paid the fine. The Prime Minister's office is said to be less concerned about further mail from police headquarters than about Officer Sue Gray's report, which was delayed due to the police investigation. A newspaper said Gray's conclusions were devastating. Photos showing the Prime Minister in a celebratory mood could prove to be particularly unpleasant. Johnson critical media like to let those affected have their say who lost relatives to COVID at the time of the parties. The image of a Prime Minister laughing and holding a glass of wine the same day could reignite emotions. Even if the Ukraine war has changed the mood in the country, and Johnson's course towards Moscow is also applauded non-partisanly, the party affair is not over. Many resent the Prime Minister for applying different standards to himself than to others. Hardly anyone believes that he thought he was at a work meeting, even when his personal advisor had written an invitation to garden drinks when the weather was nice. And don't forget, bring your own booze. The resentment can be felt deep within his own party. Some are embarrassed, others bitter, because they consider Johnson's corona policy to be too draconian in principle, and many simply have trouble defending the Prime Minister in their constituency. Hardly anyone believes that Johnson will resign of his own free will, even if the probe results would suggest so. He would have to be voted out by his own people, but such a scenario is less likely than it was at the beginning of the year. Only 9 Tory MPs have called for the Prime Minister to resign since the fine was imposed. More than 70 have publicly defended him. It also means that about 2/3 of the Conservative faction have taken political cover. Johnson is a Prime Minister who is neither supported nor overthrown by his party, wrote the Spectator editor-in-chief Fraser Nelson. This could remain the case for the time being. On the one hand, the pandemic is slowly being forgotten. Normality has largely prevailed in England since last summer. On the other hand, the threatening world situation makes it difficult for Johnson's opponents to replace the country's leader for a few lockdown drinks. This is all the more true given that his most dangerous inner party rival to date, Chancellor of the Exchequer Rishi Sunak, has almost fallen out of the running. His fatality was not so much that he also had to pay a fine for violating the corona rule, but rather a small but spicy affair involving his wife Akshata Murthy. A newspaper recently revealed that Murthy, daughter of a wealthy Indian Infosys founder N.R. Narayana Murthy, has avoided taxation in the kingdom for years using the questionable non-dom residency status. This was changed immediately, but it did put the Chancellor of the Exchequer's private affairs in the spotlight. A party that is increasingly courting voters in the socially disadvantaged North is difficult to imagine under the leadership of a de facto billionaire. The party is therefore not without capable personnel. With Secretary of State Liz Truss and Secretary of Defense Ben Wallace, there are even 2 ministers who are playing a decisive role in shaping current Russia policy. But many Tories doubt that these ministers, or for that matter, sometimes mentioned Education Secretary Nadim Zahawi, will bring the visibility and media presence that Johnson has brought to some victories for his parties. A new momentum could set in if Johnson were to lose next Thursday's local elections. The Conservative Party is currently 6 percentage points behind the Labour Party. But the trend, which slowed down a bit after Johnson's fine, has been picking up since the start of the Ukraine war. In January, the party and Johnson personally had recorded lows. Even a mediocre result should be enough to keep the Prime Minister in office for the time being. And I'm quite curious about those elections, not only because of this point. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.